Hello, my name is Kelly Hayes and welcome to my nutrition care process presentation. I will be going over the diagnosis portion of the process today. Before I got started, I just wanted to go over what the ADIME process was, and we use the acronym ADIME to break down the steps of the nutrition care process. So the first step in the process is the assessment, and then the diagnosis, which is what I will be going over today. And then the intervention and then monitoring and evaluation are kind of grouped together as the last step of the process. So the purpose of the diagnosis, like I said, comes after the assessment. And throughout the assessment, you'll be taking the patient's diet history, their medical history, maybe their family history, and looking at their labs as well to see what nutritional risks are they at. And then the diagnosis will be the main problem that you find. And the diagnosis consists of what we call a PES statement, which is another acronym that stands for problem, etiology, and signs and symptoms. So the problem is, how can you as the dietitian help this patient? What is their main problem nutritionally that they need to fix? The etiology, what's the root cause of this problem, and can an intervention address this problem? And then the signs and symptoms is what's bringing this on, what's the patient going through, what's he dealing with, and that's what we'll be looking at. And then with the PES statement, we're using standardized language, and I found this good website right here that uses some of the same words that the dietitians would use to put in the chart for the PES statement. So that was cool. So the PES statement, they're all going to be structured the same. You're going to start out with your problem, and that's going to be related to the etiology, and then as evidenced by the signs and symptoms. So an example of a PES statement, this would be for a patient that's overweight. We would say he has excessive energy intake related to his inadequate access of healthy food choices. And this could be because of several reasons, and you would find this out in the assessment, but maybe he doesn't have a car or he doesn't have access to healthy foods, and he walks down to the fast food restaurant down the street to eat dinner and lunch and all of his meals. And we evidence that he's overweight by his diet history, and he has a BMI of over 28, which puts him in that category. So what does this have to do with nutrition? Basically, your diagnosis, it's going to be different than a medical diagnosis. You're not going to be able to diagnose a patient with cancer, but we can diagnose him with a diet that will help him cope with that. This is basically how dietitians can make a difference to the patient. The diagnosis is the first plan of action towards how can we help this patient. And it gives, like I said, direction to the rest of the process. The PES statement, the diagnosis, should be clear and concise and focused on one nutritional issue. A lot of times, patients will have a lot of different things going on nutritionally, but it's up to us as the dietitians to really pick the main problem and focus on that so that we can help this patient to the best of our abilities. And we also focus on three different things: the intake, the clinical data, and the behavioral aspect of the patient. And that's kind of how we figure out what the diagnosis will be. So first, looking at the intake, some of the categories we want to be aware of is the intake level. Are they excessively eating too much? Are they not eating enough? Things like that. How are they intaking their food? Are they on parenteral nutrition? Are they tube feeding? Are they eating normally? What's their fluid intake like, and are they deficient in any nutrients? And we can find those in the labs that we look at. So clinically, functionality is one big thing. Is this patient able to get around? Can they get out of bed? Can they cook their own food? Are they in a wheelchair? Things like that. Biochemical lab values will be very important in determining, is the patient at risk for malnutrition? Are they at risk for a deficiency in a certain nutrient? Things like that. And then, of course, we'll look at their weight, too. So behavioral. This is a huge one, too. we need to know what our patient's attitude is towards food. What's their social situation? Do they have access to food, and do they have any certain religious beliefs that impact the way that they eat? So behavioral is going to be huge in diagnosing eating disorders. If a patient follows a certain religion and they don't eat a certain food group, are they getting the nutrients that they need? Things like that. And practice settings. So places that you will diagnose a patient, obviously in a clinic or in a hospital, and that's all going to be through the medical system that they have in place. Normally it'll be charted on a hospital database, and it'll be all formalized. But you can also run your own private practice as a dietitian, and it's up to the dietitian to know the way to chart that and keep up with that in their separate system. So the overall goal of the diagnosis is really to identify and describe that nutrition problem. And like I said, you want to really just focus on one problem, the one that needs to be addressed, that's most pressing to be addressed. You want to think ahead, because obviously you're going to have to develop a intervention for the diagnosis. So is the problem that we're diagnosing the patient, is it treatable? Can we help them? And then it's good to know, how long are we going to be working with this patient? Are we going to have them long term? Are we going to have them short term? And that can really play a big part in what we diagnose them for. And that's all I have. I hope you learned a lot about the diagnosis portion of the nutrition care process. Again, my name is Kelly Hayes, and thank you for watching.